You're back with us on the Gunners Club, here with Gunner and of course with Seuss. And Seuss, congratulations, 100,000 views, and let's all work together and make it to 1 million views. Well done.
Well, at the very least. And now, also on Twitter. Sorry, X. Sorry, Elon.
That's right, and I understand you've had your first video age restricted as well.
Is it? Well, you know, some people get triggered by seeing the Twin Towers on fire.
Hang around and watch a bit of this video, see what you think, and once you've done that, go back and have a look at our library, because we've got an extensive group of adventures there for you to join us in. But today, Seuss, Australia Post, is it still relevant?
I don't believe it's been relevant for years as a postal service.
Right.
It's coming of age as a parcel delivery service, you know, along the lines of, I don't know,
DHL or an Amazon
FedEx,
or something like that. Sure.
Yeah, or Star Trek locally. Even, well, Australia Post has bought Star Trek.
That's right.
Is now part of Australia Post, because parcel delivery is now going gangbusters and mail is, well, who still uses mail?
Well, actually I do. I probably post about 20 letters a week, but that's another story. But definitely that's the way it is. The number of people that are using letters, the old-fashioned snail mail, has definitely dropped. It's about a third what it was, say, from around 2007. And the business has definitely picked up in the parcel delivery services. But
well, that's where their money is.
I got a shock when the price of a postage stamp increased from $1.20 to $1.50.
Okay, why?
Well, in terms of percentage, that's a very large increase. So at the moment, I hold in my briefcase a whole wad of 30-cent stamps just to add to the $1.21s and make sure I can keep sending them out. Australia Post, though, it's owned by the Australian government, and the Australian government says that they own it for us. Made a loss recently in 2024 of about $88 million. For the year before that, it was actually just over $200 million. The business is hemorrhaging. Now, the government describes it as a commercial enterprise that they hold for us. And well, they should, because as a Victorian, we gave up our rights for this and created the monopoly of Australia Post when we joined the union that became the Federation of Australia. So the Australian Constitution, Section 51, Part 5, is basically where they appropriated, the federal government, the rights for postage and the monopoly that they've got on that. Also telegraphic services, and they had the old Postmaster General, which they spun out under that section to include Telstra as one arm.
Yep.
Another one of it being basically what they call Australia Post now today. So we gave up our right for that. It's something which should be run by the government. It should be run for us. But they're describing it as a commercial enterprise, and one that they're saying that they are not willing to throw money towards to bail out when it comes into trouble. Now, it's already been heralded by the current CEO, Mr. Graham of Australia Post, that he expects he's going to require the government to fork over literally billions of dollars to Australia Post because he believes they're going to start hemorrhaging cash. They're losing money on the mail delivery system. It's the delivery of boxes that they're making any sort of money back on.
That's right. Oh, yeah, but hang on. Aren't they, they're also making money on banking, aren't they? Because you can do basic banking services at a post office.
Yeah, so we're going to have a bit of a talk about that in a minute as well. I have this real trouble getting my head around the fact that we have given our power as Victorians when we joined the Union of Australia to the federal government, appointed them as our agents. Under the Constitution, they said they've taken this for the peace and good governance of us. And yet, what they're doing, 2/3 of our post offices actually are commercial franchises.
That's right.
That have been sold. Now, hang on a sec. We've invested the agent power to the federal government. They've invested it to the board as their agents, and then the board has decided to sell the licenses to 2/3 of the post offices to act in turn as their agents. Well, hang on a second. This is such a sacred duty that Section 51(5) of the Constitution enshrines it, gives them the power to do that. Now, 2/3 of local post offices are just that, the LPOs. It's that franchise model.
That's right. Yep.
You'll be stunned. If you look online, you'll see that people have tidied these businesses up for sale. You know, one careful owner,
No,
11
yeah.
kilometres, only went to church on a Sunday. Some of them, I kid you not, the ads read like this. You know, this business in rural, let's say Victoria, has been carefully fostered by a couple who are seeking to retire and wish to put this into the steady trust and care of experienced hands. Some of the stuff reads like that. And really, the market difference for what you pay depends on, you know, what you expect the cash flow to be in the area and the business that they do. Some of them that I've had a look at recently, they top out over $1.2 million for the license.
Ah, for the license. Okay.
So that doesn't pay for the fit out of the shop. What I find is intriguing is that there's also mortgage brokers who are in the market to lend money to people who want to buy these licenses. So hang on a second. We seceded this to the federal government. This was a sacred duty, and they've just appointed agents and agents onwards and onwards and onwards. And they've removed themselves so far from this, and now there's a commercial model of people on selling the licenses and making a profit and brokerage, etc., from the sale of these things. Most easy way to get into business of running an LPO is basically to buy an existing agency with existing license. So these things are transferable, and generally they do not have an expiry date, which is interesting.
Which also means that that there is a limited supply, so therefore the price goes up. Very similar to the model that they used to have with taxis, exactly, yes. Until the rug was pulled out from under them.
And didn't that end very well?
Oh, yes.
Talk about disruption of industry, because that's basically what we're seeing at the moment.
Yep.
There is a lot of trust for Australia Post. It's something which is an integral part of communities. During COVID, it was particularly important because you had, you know, the immunocompromised people, or people who just had a phobia of leaving their house, and they relied on pickups from the post office boxes, or, you know, the parcels to be in the care of the post office. I find it intriguing as an accountant that Australia Post commissioned a report to say what was actually very good things about them. I guess if you commission a report, you expect it.
Well,
anyway,
you would think so.
Deloitte obliged, and they spoke about, you know, it's the third most trusted provider and part of a community. And then it said second behind, and it named two other things. I would have thought second behind two things makes you third. I reread that over and over. I still can't quite get my head around that. Surely, though, I appreciate the fact that it's a very trusted part of people's communities. But in my local community where I'm at, we have an LPO, and I don't know when they've last cleaned the windows, but I would imagine when the Postmaster General ran these, that the windows actually were regularly cleaned. And I looked at the shop window this morning, and I looked and I looked and I looked, and what I saw were things like plush octopuses, all sorts of cartoon characters, 10-year-old books on Pilates, little massage wands, all sorts of bizarre stuff that really has nothing to do with stamp collecting or postage or getting your letter or parcel from A to B. This is essentially what happens.
But this is very similar and along the lines of your local service station, or sorry, petrol station, where they don't make the majority of their money from selling petrol.
Yeah.
They only make a very small percentage. Where they make their money is the lolly counter and buying your bags of chips.
Red Bull.
Oh, the Red Bull, yes. You know, all that type of stuff. That's where their money is. The post office, in this case the post office, relies on foot traffic coming in the door, possibly to mail a letter or pick up a parcel. But while you're there, waiting in line patiently, or perhaps not so patiently, depending on the length of the line, you'll be attracted and to buy something while you're there that has got nothing to do with your original intent of going in there.
There's always a bag of candy that I can't resist when I'm there.
That's it.
And it's always, you know, close to where your hip is. It's so easy just to take it on the way. But the difference is that if you've got a license to sell petrol, it's not one that's awarded by the government. And it's not one that's enshrined through the Constitution.
Yes.
And it's not one of the powers that was divested through your state to join part of the federation of the country. These are very, very different things. Now, the current CEO has wrestled with the government and massaged the expectation you know, that we should have the right to daily delivery of mail. When I was a child, mail came twice a day on a weekday and once on a Saturday. We had 11 deliveries. 11 deliveries per week. 11. The expectation now is that it's every second business day. So it's 2.5 times a week as opposed to 11.
Mm-hmm.
We've increased the price of the delivery, and now the delivery expectation is, well, if it's posted within a capital city, you should get it within 4 days. So the expectations of the service have gone down completely. As well as that, there's been the flagging the idea that we'll need to lose another 400 jobs with it, and then the bailing out to the tune of billions of dollars from the federal government. Is this a commercial enterprise or is this a government enterprise? Because what we're trying to do through the government is have our cake and eat it too. They're distancing themselves from it and saying we're not going to put more money into it for a bailout, but this is a commercial enterprise. Now, we had the scandal a few years ago when former CEO Christine Holgate was, in my opinion, treated very, very poorly for awarding 4... They were called luxury watches. In price, they were semi-luxury watches. It was just the brand that got everybody all uppity about it. They were Cartier watches. Believe me, Cartier, if you want to buy a luxury Cartier watch, you can. These things weren't. They were between $3,000 to $5,000 Australian. Mm-hmm. They were a token of a job well done.
There were a small number of senior people who'd put in an inordinate amount of work in, and they did receive an award from the chair, myself, and on behalf of the board. They were a Cartier watch of about a value of $3,000 each.
4 Cartier watches, presented as an example of fat cat largesse and what is known in politics as bad optics. 6 months on, the outrage they provoked from the Prime Minister on the day seemed curiously out of whack with the scandals that have engulfed his government since.
I was appalled. It's disgraceful. And it's not on. The Chief Executive wishes to stand aside. Well, not wishes to stand aside, she's been instructed to stand aside. And if she doesn't wish to do that, Mr. Speaker, she can go.
Now, effectively what happened was her team negotiated with 3 of the major 4 banks. It didn't include ANZ for what you brought up, Suze.
Yep.
The Post Bank. And that's a really good service which is offered, particularly in the rural communities.
Well, particularly in the face of the fact that the banks are shutting doors all over the place.
Yeah, but that doesn't wash with me at all. Because, again, if you look at Section 1 of the Constitution, but wander down instead of Section 5 to Section 13, that specifically gives the power of banks for nationwide trading. And that's something, again, the Victoria's joined the Federation and given up that power. So the banks should actually be effectively doing the banking. It shouldn't go across to this other semi-autonomous entity. It should, again, through the Constitution, for that very same argument, be done by the banks. In any case, it was a lucrative contract. It was awarded for a job well done. And according to Christine Holgate, she said that as it was a commercial enterprise, the chair told her that she was to reward employees for the job done. There's been quite a lot of infighting, as you know, between them. She says that she was pushed. He, in turn, said that he was shocked to learn of her resignation.
Yeah.
Both of those can't wash. It's not quite possible.
But even the Prime Minister got involved in this whole debacle by basically convicting her without even knowing what the situation was.
Well, what Scott Morrison decided to do was to say that it was outrageous.
Yeah.
It was a disgrace. And that he was running the business, the commercial enterprise, as a trustee for the Australian people. Like I said, there's a lot of problems with that statement just there. And he also said, which is something you enjoy in your videos, that it didn't pass the pub test.
Exactly.
Now, the new CEO has made a lot of changes at Australia Post, Mr. Graham. What he's done, the first thing he did was basically get rid of the executive washroom, the executive dining room.
Well, that's,
the executive office, and the big offices that they had there in Burke Street in the shiny side of Melbourne. They've reduced the bonuses paid from about 2,500 people eligible down to 100 people that are eligible. He's still the second highest paid public serviceman in Australia. So let's not get upset. So he's taking home, I think, it was in the order of $2.4 million, I think, from the last time it was published. But going back 2 people before them, Ahmed from Hood, took home over $10 million. Now, I've got to ask you, if this is a commercial enterprise that last year has lost 88 million, the year before that lost $200 million, just how commercial is this enterprise when you can afford to pay someone $10 million or someone the rate of even $2.5 million is very high. Now, I know in corporate governance there's the idea that you have to attract and retain good talent by paying them the commensurate pay. But this is not a public company. This is where the government's trying to eat its cake and have it too. So who's setting the remuneration? Well, it's set by a separate government committee. It's not set by the shareholders. Let me tell you what would happen if this was a public company. Okay, public company, in the AGM, they have a motion on the remuneration for the board. If you only need 1/4 of the people to object, 25% or more to object, 2 annual general meetings in a row, and that is what's called a spill motion. You can then spill the board, everyone has to vacate their positions, you can vote again. That would be a control of remuneration. Not only that, but if there were questions regarding things like the award, let's say it was improprietous, okay, the award of the watches. Looking at the dollar value, I really don't think it was improprietous, but let's say that it was. If you had a group of, say, 100 shareholders or 5% of the voting power, they could bring that question before the board in the next general meeting. It's not a public entity, so we don't have that. So what we have instead is a person who is the Prime Minister of the country citing a self-appointed pub test. Hey, we're the ones in the pub. And then you have the he said, she said between the chairman saying he was shocked at the resignation and the CEO saying that she was hurt that she was sidelined and forced to resign. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't pass the pub test. Now, for all these reasons that I've cited, I think that Australia Post is becoming irrelevant. Effectively, what it's becoming now is very much a competitor in delivery of parcels. Interestingly, Christine Holgate, who I said was the ex-CEO of Australia Post, is now working in logistics. And suddenly she's got a very different idea that she didn't have at the time in Australia Post, which is that Australia Post should be economically working to help handle the competitors' products, to deliver them at a low price. It's a genius idea.
Of course it is.
So I think for all these reasons, I would argue that Australia Post is becoming increasingly irrelevant, despite how much it is part of a person's neighbourhood. But I want to end with this final thought. I was just 2 days ago in the old goldfields of Victoria.
Oh, yes.
So I've been to some of the old towns like Yakandanda and Bright, Myrtleford.
Only in Australia would you have a town called Yakandanda. Or perhaps Woy Woy.
And the kindergarten had a little childcare group called Little Yaks, which I think is magic. All of these places had post offices. There was the boom of gold. Gold was found, and suddenly the government had the foresight. It could even react and build permanent post offices.
Yes.
Now, I've lived in an area west of Melbourne where it wasn't spontaneous growth through something like the gold rush. Gold wasn't discovered there. Instead, there was careful planning for tens of thousands of people to move into this region in consultation with major builders and the governments. Despite the fact there's still a charter for a post office to be in the area, there is no post office. Not only is there no post office, the streets themselves have not one post box either. So people might clutch it to their heart, or Deloitte might write this tear-inducing, heartwarming paper. But if they can't get it together to build post offices or even license it out where the people are, it is an irrelevant institution.
Tend to agree there.
Like what you see? Subscribe and watch some more. We've got plenty of adventures.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll catch you on the next one.